You've seen these places on your Instagram feed. Maybe you've pinned them. Maybe you've even put them on your bucket list, that running tab in your head of "before I die, I want to go here." Stop. Before you book that ticket, you need to hear this. Some of the most gorgeous locations on this planet are also the most efficient killing machines nature has ever designed, and they don't care how many followers you have. Today we're going through 13 places that look like they were ripped straight from a fantasy film and work like a perfectly engineered death trap. We'll go from a swimming hole in Texas, where children laugh on the surface while bodies rot 30 feet below them, all the way to a place on Mount Everest with the most beautiful name you've ever heard. It's called Rainbow Valley. When you find out what that rainbow actually is, you'll never look at those summit photos the same way again. Location 1, Jacob's Well, Wimberley, Texas, USA. Picture this. You're in central Texas. It's 102 degrees. The air feels like a hairdryer pointed at your face. Then you stumble across what looks like a miracle, a perfectly circular pool of impossibly clear water, cut into the limestone like something God drilled with a compass. This is Jacob's Well, and yes, it's exactly as beautiful as it looks. That's the problem. What you're seeing from the surface is a 10-foot wide opening that drops straight down into the dark. The water is so clear that kids who jump in look like they're floating in mid-air, like astronauts in slow motion. Tourists line up by the hundreds, people take videos, people laugh. None of them know they're standing over the entrance to one of the deadliest underwater cave systems in North America. Below that sunlit opening is a network of 4 cave passages that wind deeper into permanent darkness. The tunnels get so narrow that trained cave divers have to remove their oxygen tanks and push them in front of their bodies just to squeeze through. But the real killer isn't the darkness, it's the floor. The bottom is covered in a thick layer of silt, fine as talcum powder and just as deadly. The water looks crystal clear until it doesn't. One wrong flick of a fin and that silt erupts into a dense brown cloud. In seconds, visibility drops from 30 feet to 0. Your flashlight becomes useless. The beam just bounces back at you like headlights in fog. You're sealed in absolute blackness, in a tunnel you can barely fit through, with no idea which direction is up. That's when the panic hits. And panic burns through oxygen 3 times faster than calm. At least 9 bodies have been pulled from Jacob's Well. The worst was in 1979, 2 young men. One got stuck, the other went back to help. Rescue divers reported that one of them had scraped the gravel tunnel walls with his bare hands trying to dig an exit. He broke his fingers on the rock. He never found the light. For years, a sign hung underwater with a skull and the words, "Stop, nothing in this cave is worth your life." They removed it. Thrill seekers kept treating it as a challenge. Jacob's Well is a postcard from heaven that doubles as a one-way door to hell. Location 2, the Bolton Strid, Yorkshire, England. Somewhere in the Yorkshire countryside, between ancient forest and rolling hills, there's a stream so narrow you could jump it. Tourists stop to paint it, couples walk along it. It looks like something out of a Beatrix Potter book, charming, harmless, English. 0 survivors. Not a low survival rate, not very dangerous, 0. Not one person who has ever fallen into the Strid has been pulled out alive. Here's why. What looks like a quaint little stream is actually the River Wharfe, a massive, powerful waterway that upstream stretches 30 feet wide. But then the bedrock forces every single gallon of that water through a gap barely 6 feet across. Geologists describe it as a river that's been turned on its side. What you see on the surface is a lie. Underwater, the banks don't continue straight down. They flare outward like the inside of a mushroom cap. Beneath your feet, there are submerged ledges, cave systems, and hydraulic currents that work like an industrial vacuum. The moment a person hits the water, they're not swept downstream. They're yanked directly downward and pinned against the submerged ceiling of an underwater cave. No life jacket helps, no swimming ability matters. The physics simply don't allow survival. In the 19th century, a young couple was walking the bank on their wedding day. The bride slipped, her husband grabbed for her hand. The water took both of them. Their bodies were found 3 days later, miles downstream. The Strid is the most dangerous body of water on Earth, hiding behind the most innocent face in nature. Location 3. Lake Natron, northern Tanzania. Look at this image and tell me that's not Mars. Blood red water. White mineral shores. An alien silence. This is Lake Natron in northern Tanzania, and it's the only place on Earth that can do what the mythological Medusa could only dream of. It turns living creatures to stone. The chemistry here is catastrophic. The lake is supersaturated with sodium carbonate and other minerals. The pH can hit 12, roughly the same as concentrated ammonia or industrial drain cleaner. The water temperature regularly reaches 140 degrees Fahrenheit. When animals die here, birds, bats, insects that fly too close, they don't decay. Their bodies absorb the soda ash and calcify. Photographer Brandt famously discovered dozens of these statues arranged perfectly in their postures of death. Birds sitting on branches, lying on the shore, wings half open, all of them turned to stone. For a human, contact with this water means third-degree chemical burns. Splashes in the eyes can cause instantaneous blindness. If you have even a small cut on your skin, the pain has been described as pouring acid directly into a wound, because that's essentially what it is. The only animals that thrive here are lesser flamingos. Their legs are covered in thick, horny skin that acts like rubber wading boots. 3 million of them breed on Natron's shores each year, the largest flamingo colony on the planet. For everything else, Lake Natron is a surrealist painting that eats anything that gets too close. Location 4. Shanay Timpishka, the boiling river, Peruvian Amazon. Deep inside the Peruvian Amazon, there is a river that science insisted for decades could not exist. Spanish conquistadors came back from the jungle, raving about a place where the water boiled and the air burned your lungs. Geologists laughed them off. The nearest active volcano is 450 miles away. A boiling river was simply impossible. It's not impossible, it's real. Local tribes have known it for centuries. They call it Shanay Timpishka, boiled with the heat of the sun. This isn't a hot spring or a tourist spa. This is a full river, more than 4 miles long, up to 20 feet deep, where water temperature runs between 176 and 212 degrees Fahrenheit. If you slip on the muddy bank and fall in, you won't drown, you'll cook. Geophysicist Andrés Ruzo, the scientist who brought this place to wider attention, witnessed it firsthand. When a small animal falls in, the sequence is specific and brutal. The eyes turn white first, protein in the eyeballs denatures in a fraction of a second. Then, as the animal fights to swim, muscle tissue begins to separate from the bone, literally cooking off the skeleton. The animal loses motor function within seconds, opens its mouth to cry out, and inhales boiling water. What floats downstream is no longer a creature, it's broth. Local shamans use the steam for healing rituals. They cook food by lowering it into the river on a rope. But they know the first law of the jungle. You approach Shanay Timpishka on solid footing with a clear head, or you don't approach it at all. Location 5. Cave of Crystals, Chihuahua, Mexico. If you've ever seen Superman's Fortress of Solitude, you already have a rough picture of what this place looks like. A vast underground chamber 1,000 feet below the Chihuahuan desert, filled with translucent white beams that rise from the floor like frozen lightning. These are selenite crystals, the largest ever discovered on Earth. Some reach 36 feet in length, weigh 55 tons, and are wide enough to walk across like bridges. Every visual instinct in your brain screams, cold, Arctic, pristine. Your brain is wrong. The Cave of Crystals sits directly above a magma reservoir. Air temperature is a stable 136 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity is 100%, absolute maximum. The air is so saturated with moisture it physically cannot absorb any more. This matters because your body's entire cooling system depends on evaporation. When you sweat, that sweat evaporates, pulling heat away from your skin. It's the only air conditioning you've got. In 100% humidity, your sweat doesn't evaporate. It just runs down your body doing nothing. Internal temperature climbs unchecked. Blood thickens. Your heart races trying to pump it. Within 10 to 15 minutes without protection, you're experiencing irreversible organ failure. Researchers look like astronauts, custom suits packed with ice, respirators connected to cooling backpacks. And even then, maximum time inside is 40 minutes before they must evacuate. Nature built the most breathtaking room on the planet and made it completely impossible to enjoy. Location 6, the Danakil Depression, northeast Ethiopia. If you want to know what another planet looks like, skip the rocket, just fly to northeast Ethiopia. The Danakil Depression is the most psychedelic landscape on Earth. Neon yellow fields, acidic green pools, alien orange salt formations. Every photograph looks AI generated. It's 100% real. It's 100% deadly. Danakil holds the title of hottest place on Earth by average annual temperature. The thermometer rarely dips below 113 degrees Fahrenheit, but the heat isn't even the main event. This region sits at the junction of three tectonic plates, slowly ripping the crust apart. Those colorful pools that make photographers weep, reservoirs of concentrated acid. The pH approaches 0, more corrosive than the battery acid in your car. If your foot slips into one of those pools, it eats through your shoe and skin to the bone before you can pull it out. But even if you watch every step, the air itself is trying to kill you. Chlorine, sulfur dioxide, and carbon dioxide billow constantly from ground fissures. The chlorine enters your lungs, reacts with the moisture inside them, and becomes hydrochloric acid. Your lungs fill with fluid, you drown in your own body. Local salt miners, the Afar people, work here in conditions that would horrify any labor inspector. Their life expectancy is catastrophically short. Tourists are only admitted in armed groups with security guards because in addition to the acid and the gas, kidnapping by armed factions is a regular documented threat. Danakil proves what every creature with a survival instinct already knows. In nature, the brightest colors are warning labels. Location 7, Lake Nyos, northwest Cameroon. We're halfway through, and this next one doesn't sound possible until you realize it already happened. This is Lake Nyos, a quiet, beautiful crater lake in the mountains of Cameroon. For generations, the people in the valleys below considered it sacred, a gift from God, a source of water and life. They had no idea they were living at the base of a loaded weapon. On the night of August 21st, 1986, nothing seemed unusual. Villages in the valleys were settling in for sleep. But deep beneath the lake's surface, something had been building for years. Volcanic CO2 had been seeping up from below and dissolving into the cold, deep water under enormous pressure, like a 2 billion-gallon bottle of carbonated water. Something that night, possibly a landslide, possibly a temperature change, disturbed the balance. The lake turned over, and it exhaled. 1.6 million tons of carbon dioxide exploded from the surface, but CO2 is heavier than air. It didn't rise, it flowed silently, invisibly, at nearly 60 miles per hour down the mountain slopes into the sleeping valleys below. People didn't suffocate the way we imagine. No gasping, no panic, no warning. At high enough concentrations of CO2, you simply lose consciousness within 2 breaths. You never wake up. The wave swept through 3 villages, lamps went out, animals dropped where they stood. When survivors came down from higher ground the next morning, they found a valley in unbroken silence. No birds, no cattle, no dogs, thousands of people and animals lying exactly where they had been, no visible injuries. They looked like they were sleeping. 1,746 people died overnight. The lake itself turned from blue to blood red, iron dredged from the bottom, marking the site like a crime scene. Lake Nyos is proof that the most terrifying natural disasters don't always come with fire and sound. Sometimes death arrives as a quiet, odorless cloud that puts you to sleep forever. Location 8. Valley of Death, Kamchatka, Russia. On the Kamchatka Peninsula, at the base of an active volcano, in one of Russia's most remote nature reserves, there's a meadow that looks like the perfect camping spot. Lush green grass, mountain air, absolute quiet. That quiet is the first warning sign. Look closer at the grass and you'll see lumps. Dozens of them. Bears, foxes, eagles, wolverines, all lying still, no visible wounds, as if they simply decided to take a nap in the same meadow at the same time. This is the Valley of Death, a natural gas chamber operating non-stop since its accidental discovery in 1975. Volcanic fissures beneath the soil release a cocktail that includes hydrogen cyanide and cyanogen chloride, compounds functionally identical to chemical warfare agents. Being heavier than air, they don't disperse upward. They pool in the low ground, forming an invisible toxic lake about 3 feet deep. The valley runs like a perfectly designed kill chain. Small birds and rodents are drawn in by warm, snow-free ground. They hit the gas cloud and die within minutes. Their bodies attract foxes and wolverines. The foxes come down for an easy meal, take 2 breaths, and stay forever. The smell of those carcasses draws bears and eagles. They walk into the low ground and die next to the animals they came to eat. Scientists have found these layered death scenes, rodent skeletons at the bottom, fox remains above, a bear carcass on top. A perfect, grotesque fossil record of a food chain collapsing into itself. The bodies don't rot normally. The toxic atmosphere suppresses decay. Animals look freshly dead for weeks, keeping the trap fresh for the next visitor. Location 9. Mount Washington, New Hampshire, USA. Here's a question. What's the highest wind speed ever recorded on the surface of the Earth? Not on Everest, not on the ocean. On a 6,288-foot peak in New Hampshire, a mountain so modest you can drive to the top on a paved road. On April 12, 1934, a weather station on Mount Washington recorded 231 miles per hour. That record stood for over 60 years. A Category 5 hurricane, the most powerful storm classification on Earth, caps at around 157 miles per hour and levels concrete buildings. The wind on Mount Washington can lift a grown adult off the ground and throw them into a ravine. The mountain sits at the collision point of 3 major weather systems: warm Atlantic air from the south, cold Arctic fronts from Canada, and nor'easters off the New England coast. The mountain's shape funnels and compresses all of it. It's a natural wind tunnel with a summit. But the wind is only part of it. Weather here changes not hour by hour, but minute by minute. You can start a hike in 70-degree sunshine. By the time you reach the top, a 45-minute walk, the temperature can be -40-degree Fahrenheit. Factor in 100 miles per hour winds, and wind chill hits -100. Exposed skin freezes in under a minute. Hypothermia sets in before you even realize you're cold. More than 150 people have died on this mountain, many of them in summer, many of them in shorts. On the trail to the summit, there's a famous yellow sign, "Stop, the area ahead has the worst weather in America." Many have died there from exposure, even in the summer. Turn back now if the weather is bad. Every year, people walk past it. The observatory buildings on the summit are bolted to the bedrock with chains. The windows are bulletproof glass, not for security, but because ordinary glass would be punched in by the wind. Location 10. Fraser Island, K'gari, Queensland, Australia. Australia has spent centuries building its reputation as the continent where everything wants to kill you. Fraser Island doesn't just live up to that reputation, it exceeds it, while somehow also looking like a Bounty chocolate bar commercial. The world's largest sand island. UNESCO World Heritage. Pristine freshwater lakes, the color of swimming pools, hundreds of miles of untouched white beach, and a local search and rescue team that refers to it, without irony, as a buffet for predators. Start with the ocean. You cannot swim here. The rip currents alone can outpull an Olympic swimmer and drag you into open sea before anyone on shore notices you're gone. And the waters around Fraser are a favored hunting ground for great white and tiger sharks, which regularly patrol within arm's reach of the shoreline. If you decide the ocean is off limits and stick to the beach, you're now in dingo territory. The Fraser Island dingoes are the purest wild strain remaining in Australia, completely unsocialized toward humans. They hunt in coordinated packs. Every year brings documented attacks on adults. Small children left unattended have been dragged. They are not pets. They are apex predators that happen to look adorable. If you retreat from the beach into the forest, you're walking through the habitat of Sydney funnel web spiders, whose fangs can pierce a fingernail and whose venom can kill an adult in 15 minutes, and eastern brown snakes, the second most venomous land snake on the planet. Fraser Island is a 5-star resort designed by something that doesn't want you to leave alive. Location 11. Berkeley Pit, Butte, Montana, USA. From the air, it looks like a bruise on the earth, a mile-wide crater filled with water the color of dried blood. This is the Berkeley Pit in Butte, Montana, the most toxic lake in America. Some scientists argue it's the most toxic body of water anywhere on Earth. This used to be the biggest copper mine in the United States. In 1982, the company shut down and turned off the pumps keeping groundwater out. The pit started filling. The chemistry started happening. Water passing through mineral-rich rocks reacts with oxygen and iron pyrite to produce sulfuric acid. What's sitting in the Berkeley Pit today is 40 billion gallons of acidic soup loaded with arsenic, cadmium, zinc, lead, and copper at concentrations that make it corrosive enough to dissolve metal. Put your hand in it, you get severe chemical burns. Drink it, your organs begin failing faster than an ambulance can reach you. In November 2016, a flock of migrating snow geese spotted the enormous lake from altitude and landed for the night. By morning, the surface was covered in white bodies. Those that didn't die instantly tried to take off and couldn't. Autopsies showed the water had burned their esophaguses and destroyed their kidneys from the inside within hours. The lake digested them alive. The water level keeps rising. Scientists monitor it constantly. If it reaches a critical threshold and flows into the regional groundwater system, it could poison the water supply for an entire valley. The Berkeley Pit is what happens when human industry borrows from the earth without a repayment plan. Nature always collects. Location 12. The Blue Hole, Dahab, Red Sea, Egypt. The diving community calls it the Divers' Cemetery, a circular karst sinkhole in a reef just off the shore of Dahab, Egypt. No current, no waves, easy beach access, it looks like the most beginner-friendly dive site you've ever seen. It's also killed more divers than any other single site on the planet. The unofficial count is over 200. The mechanism is elegant and cruel. At 180 feet down, the wall of the Blue Hole opens into a horizontal arch, a tunnel 85 feet long that leads through the reef to the open ocean. Divers see something genuinely magical, a cathedral tunnel with brilliant blue light streaming through the far end. It looks close, it looks irresistible. At 180 feet, it isn't close, and you're not thinking clearly. At that depth, nitrogen in your bloodstream behaves like alcohol. It's called nitrogen narcosis, the rapture of the deep. Your judgment evaporates, your fear response dampens, you feel euphoric, invincible, slightly drunk. Divers describe the arch as looking like they could see home through it. They stop checking their gauges. They don't realize the tunnel is longer than it looks, that there might be countercurrent inside, that they're still going deeper. Their air runs out. Consciousness fades, they drift slowly to the bottom, watching beautiful blue light until it goes dark. Along the cliff face at the entry point, the local authorities allowed memorial plaques to be mounted. James, 22. Stephen, 35. There are so many that Egypt has officially banned new ones. They felt it was discouraging tourism. New names keep being added anyway. In 2000, diving instructor Yuri Lipsky brought a camera on what would be his final dive. The footage recovered from the bottom shows him falling in peaceful slow motion, looking at his depth gauge, watching the numbers climb past the point of no return, unable to stop his descent. His brain was too saturated with nitrogen to save itself. The camera kept rolling on the seafloor until the recovery team arrived. The blue hole whispers to divers, and then it keeps them. Location 13, Rainbow Valley, Mount Everest, 26,000 feet. We've talked about acid lakes and invisible gas and underwater caves. I told you at the start that the last location had the most beautiful name of all of them. I said when you understood what the name actually means, you'd never look at those Everest summit photos the same way again. At 26,000 feet on the northeast ridge of Mount Everest, in what climbers call the death zone, there is a stretch of mountain they call Rainbow Valley. The name sounds like a miracle. You picture light refracting through ice crystals, an atmospheric wonder visible only from the roof of the world. The rainbow isn't light. The bright splashes of color scattered across the snow, red, orange, blue, yellow, electric green, are the down jackets of dead climbers. Rainbow Valley is an open-air cemetery holding hundreds of bodies that have never been brought down and never will be. The extreme cold and dry air of the death zone means the bodies don't decompose. They lie exactly as they fell, some curled into themselves for warmth, some face down in the snow, some on their backs staring at the sky they spent years and hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to reach. The wind moves their hoods and the fabric of their suits. From a distance, they look like they're breathing. Why don't they remove them? Because they can't. At 26,000 feet, the human body is in a state of continuous slow dying. Every step requires the effort of a marathon. Helicopters cannot operate at that altitude. The air is too thin to generate lift. A frozen body with all its gear weighs over 300 pounds. Moving one requires a dedicated expedition of 10 or more professional Sherpas, each risking their own life with every hour spent in the death zone. The rule on Everest is simple and brutal. The mountain keeps what it takes. The most well-known body is known only by what he's wearing: green boots. He was an Indian climber named Tsewang Paljor who died in 1996 during a summit push. He sheltered in a small rock alcove just off the main trail and froze in place, still wearing his bright green plastic mountaineering boots. For over 2 decades, hundreds of climbers stepped over or around his protruding legs on the way to their own summit attempts. He became a landmark climbers would radio base camp. I'm passing green boots now, about an hour to the summit. A man became a mile marker. Rainbow Valley is where ambition gets stripped of everything: dignity, purpose, even the basic human right to be buried. The people who lie there didn't fail. Most of them made the summit. They just couldn't survive the success, and the ones still climbing past them, stepping over their legs, refusing to make eye contact as they head upward. They understand, because at 26,000 feet, stopping to help means 2 bodies in the snow instead of 1. This is the most beautiful, most blatantly indifferent place on Earth. The mountain doesn't care about your preparation, your experience, or what you paid. It takes who it wants, arranges them in their colorful coats against the white snow, and lets the living keep walking by. Now you know what those perfect photos are hiding. 13 places where nature built something stunning and then made absolutely sure you'd pay to see it up close. Which one got under your skin? Drop it in the comments. I want to know which one you'd still go to, even knowing everything. If something in here made you shift in your seat, hit like. It helps more than you think. Stay curious, stay alive. See you in the next one.